Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to the second channel. Trying something new, gonna do a batch video of one-shots following an actual theme. So this one is 15 stories of Deathworlder shenanigans that will make you laugh. This is all taken from the main channel and put into a compilation, so you might find something you haven't seen on the main channel if you watch this, and some people prefer the longer format. Maybe you prefer just having a theme with the format. So, if you do like this, subscribe and all the usual YouTube shite. But, one thing, this is going to be a longer video, probably close to 2 hours in length, which means that I'm going to be putting in 2 mid-roll adverts. I try to avoid it normally, but the normal videos are quite short and it's fine. This one's being quite long, so I'm going to put one roughly 1/3 of the way in and then one 2/3 of the way in. So, in a 2-hour video, that's advert every 40 minutes or so. This, of course, assumes that this channel gets monetized at some point when we have enough watch time. Anyways, on to the stories, and I hope that you enjoy. Shots Fired, written by elspawno. Just sit tight, Lieutenant, and be calm. This isn't a court-martial. We just need to get our facts together here. General Eric Whittaker tried to calm the obviously worried young woman down. It wasn't every day a diplomatic meeting went so terribly wrong as to nearly start a war. But as of yet, nobody knew why the Krell ambassador started screaming in obvious distress, struggling to breathe. And even as he started choking for air, his entourage started coughing and turned green themselves. They barely managed to extricate the comatose ambassador to their ship in time to save his life. But the ambassador still hadn't come out of his coma yet. The Krell naturally assumed that it was a chemical attack, and since the humans in the room were unaffected, blame fell squarely on them. Certainly the Krell were paranoid enough to jump to the conclusion that it had to be the humans, and that the incident had to be deliberate. Only the Krell's sense of honor had stayed their hand, and given the humans some time to investigate the matter. Young Lieutenant Yvette Coulson was certainly torn off about it, for she had been assigned to handle the security arrangements. She nodded nervously and replied, "Yes, sir, I'll try." "Good," the general began. "Now take me through your security arrangements and anything you might have discovered." "Yes, sir," she began. "First, we chose the diplomatic station orbiting Jut 2 for the meeting. It was on the edge of Krell space, and a very out-of-the-way choice. We did the usual sweeps for weapons and sabotage, but that was largely a formality. The diplomatic station had been under constant control since it was built. Nonetheless, everything was by the book, sir. We checked every millimeter of that station. Then a second team, led by Lieutenant Teller, conducted their own search, and likewise found nothing. I have holologs of the entire sweep, sir." "Good. It seems unlikely anything was there already then," the general replied. The diplomatic attaché sitting beside him seemed rather less convinced of that. But then again, the diplomatic service never had a high level of confidence in military competency. As far as the diplomatic service was concerned, every Marine officer was a jarhead ground pounder in disguise, but the attaché nonetheless remained silent. "My thoughts exactly, sir, but I don't see how anything could have gotten in either. We checked the diplomats on both sides thoroughly, and the crowd even started getting testy because of our paranoia," Yvette answered. The general pondered that a moment. "What about the Grishu? They have personal stealthing fields, and don't like either the Krell or us. They'd love to start a war between us." "We thought of that, sir. Just before the diplomats arrived, we started a dust-up, putting a small amount of specifically marked silica dust in the air circulation system. If a stealth field was around, the dust would disappear off the internal scanners when across the stealthing field, and we'd know the stealth Grissu was around. Nothing came up." "So no weapons on board before the meeting. No way the diplomats could have brought a weapon of their own, and no way someone could have used a stealth field inside the station. This is quite a mystery, Lieutenant." The general rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You are dismissed for now, but I want those holologs sent to my office immediately." "Yes, sir." The young lieutenant saluted crisply and turned on her heels and vanished with a sigh of relief. The attaché, a mid-level bureaucrat from a delegation foisted on him by a diplomatic service, decided to chime in. Whittaker couldn't even remember the guy's name, but his pencil-neck meddling had already grown tiresome enough. But you're just going to believe her. She's probably just trying to cover her own rear for security mistake, the attaché said angrily. You should put her up on trial for her incompetence. Mind your place, delegate. This is a military investigation, and I will conduct it as I see fit until my superiors tell me otherwise. The general grew angry, suppressing the barely restrainable urge to wring the disrespectful puke's scrawny little neck. Now bring me the biotechnician. The attaché said nothing, but got up, opened the door, and motioned to the next person in line to enter. Hi? The biotechnician was clearly not military, and merely an employee of the station. He appeared to be well into middle age, and his name suggested an Indian subcontinent extraction. For the record, what's your name and occupation, son? General asked kindly. Harsha Patel, General, he answered nervously. I'm the chief biotechnician on board the station. Good. So talk to me about the air mixture and Kral biology. Was their air properly balanced for them? Any potential contaminants or irritants in the atmosphere? The general folded his hands patiently and let Harsha work out his reply. Well, General Sir, the Kral breathe an air mixture very similar to humans, mostly inert nitrogen, which doesn't really do anything. It's just there, you understand, and a primary oxygen component. The percentages are a little different, and the trace gases on their home planet are a little different too. But I reconfigured the station to match their preferences, since humans can breathe their air mixture just fine, Harsha explained. Wait, the general replied. You use their air mixture, not ours. Yes. It seemed to be the diplomatic thing to do. Then I called their delegation's biotech and had him analyze the atmosphere to confirm that I got the mixture right. Harsha looked at the attaché and then back at Whitaker. You mind if I smoke, sir? Helps me calm down, you know. No, I don't mind, the general began. A filthy habit, the attaché interrupted. No use smoking when the Kral were here. Maybe that's what put the ambassador in a coma, you nitwit. For his part, General Whitaker glared at the attaché in obvious loathing, but let the question stand. No, sir, Harsha explained nervously, stuttering his words. I wasn't even on board the station, sir. I configured the proper air mixture, got confirmation from the Kral that it was okay, and left for the service tug, sir. I figured it wouldn't do to smoke in the station with them on board. Didn't want to offend the bigwigs from the Kral, so I went to have a cig on the tug, where I dialed into the station systems via the net in case anything went wrong. Harsha fumbled for his lighter while the attaché looked on in disgust. Well, it is still a filthy habit for a biotechnician. I'll have to mark that in your file. I've got some pull with the Home Office. I'm telling you, if we find out you're smoking on board the station with the Kral on board, I'll have you before a tribunal before you finish that death stick. Anyway, Harsha, you said you were monitoring the station from the service tug. Did you see anything out of the ordinary? Whitaker asked, ignoring the attaché's vitriol. No, I had automatic alarms rigged to trigger if anything exceeded the parameters sent to us by the Kral, and also trip if they exceeded human parameters. Nothing happened, General. I poured through all the sensor data, and even went back and disassembled the sensors after the fact to ensure that there wasn't any problem with them. They were all new, top-of-the-line Dynacorp Atmos sensors that I installed and tested just for this conference, so I didn't think anything could be wrong with them. But after the incident, I disassembled them manually, one by one, just to be sure. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So far as I could tell, there was nothing wrong with the air, sir. Certainly no chemical attack took place. You understand we will have to corroborate your story with the holologs, right? The attaché answered. So if any part of your story isn't true... It's all true. Please, look at the logs, sirs. I wish I knew what went wrong. I haven't slept since the incident. This is a biotech horror story, you know. I'd fallen on my sword if I did it, General. Believe me, I would. But I can't find anything that I did wrong. Harsha was exasperated and took a long drag on the cigarette. Whitaker thought that over for a moment, letting the silence linger like the technician's cloud of tobacco smoke, curling around the room. There was a piece to this puzzle that eluded him. He prided himself on being a good judge of character, or at least a human character, at any rate, and so he trusted his instincts. Harsha was telling the truth. Every part of his gut told him so. And yet... "Did you talk to the Krell biotech after the incident?" Whitaker asked, his thoughts still spinning. Harsha shook his head quickly. "No, I tried to, you understand, but he wouldn't take my call. I guess that's to be expected. He probably thinks I did it." "Unfortunate. If we could send your sensor logs, maybe he'd spot something that we were missing. Something maybe only the Krell would know," Whitaker mused. "Had the same thought, but, Harsha shrugged. "Well, if you weren't such a feck-up, maybe this wouldn't have happened in the first place," the attaché said acidly. "You won't be staying here much longer, that's for sure. I hate smokers, and I hate incompetents that can't do their job. You had one job, to keep the Krell breathing, and you couldn't even do— Shut up!" The general's voice boomed, but the attaché was not intimidated. For his part, Harsha's face went pale, and he fumbled for his cigarette, nearly dropping it on the table. "And you, General, your security was a disaster. Maybe I'll have your stars with us. The sector chief is a friend of mine, you know. You do whatever you want. In the meantime, the security detail is my command, and I will follow my orders and conduct this investigation properly, without threatening people who are just doing their job." Jesus. For a diplomatic attaché, you are as undiplomatic as anyone that I have ever met. "No need to incompetent jarheads, General," the attaché smirked, and Whitaker knew in that moment that he would have sold his soul to the devil to wipe that crap-eating grin off the diplomat's face. "You can go, Harsha," the general dismissed him. "You, on the other hand," he looked at the attaché, "can stay right there while I get the next interviewee." Whitaker led in the next man, an older gentleman, still wearing his chef's apron. He sat the chef down carefully, casting a warning glance at the diplomat, and sat down himself. "For the record, please state your name and occupation," Whitaker stated simply. "Oh, I'm Jeremy Davidson, head chef of the station." The chef looked to be in his late 50s, and despite his European name, looked to be mostly of the old Central American extraction. That was rather common from the border worlds, which was settled by an oddball mixture of old Terran ethnicities. "Okay, Chef, I need you to walk me through this. Did you, or those under you," Whitaker almost found himself saying "under your command," but stopped himself just short of it, "under your direction, cook anything for the Krell?" "Oh no, never. We were under orders from the diplomatic service. Absolutely nothing was to be served to any alien. I mean, besides the possibility of, incompatibility, what if they didn't like it? No chef wants to start an interstellar war because the steak was undercooked, let me tell you. Did you know that the Tier only eat meat raw? Oh, no. Bad enough to cook for some of the humans around here." Jeremy cast a glance at the attaché. "Definitely not cooking for aliens, no sir." "Could any of the diplomats have given your plate of food to the Krell?" Whitaker asked. The diplomat shuffled uncomfortably in his seat. No, not possible. So we fed our delegation a few hours before the meeting. But you know, I'm a paranoid sort of guy. I guess that's why they've stationed me all the way out in Buttfeck, Egypt. No, not a plate was left behind. No way I was going to be responsible for that kind of crap. Pardon my French. We collected everything, and I made sure the waiters checked it all out. Jeremy nodded emphatically to reinforce his point. The general smiled a bit, despite himself. "I like a paranoid chef, but it is possible that someone on our delegation could have, I don't know, maybe grabbed a piece of food, shoved it in his pocket, and later given it to the Krell. Could your waiters have missed that?" The chef rubbed his chin thoughtfully for a moment. "Well, I guess, I don't know what kind of dumb crap would do that, but I suppose it is possible. Waiters ain't security guards, let me tell you. But mayhaps you could check the logs, and they would show you if someone was dumb enough to do that." The attaché grew livid, his face turning red. "Now don't you go blaming my people for your feck-ups, General." Whitaker smiled. "Just checking all avenues, bureaucrat." He practically spat that last word. "My name isn't Bureaucrat Jarhead, it's Charles." "Whatever, Chuck." the general replied, at a loss for any other questions for the chef. He asked about the menu. What did you serve our delegation? Jeremy beamed with pride. Well, a lot of stuff. I had a full menu, let me tell you. Traditional North Ham cooking, Italian, even some stuff from home. Whitaker paused. From home? Yeah, man. I'm from New Texas. We know how to cook a mean Tex-Mex. Runs in the family. The chef smiled warmly. Hell, I'd cook you some right now if you wanted. Anyway, the bureaucrats, the diplomatic service representatives, they had their choice. Spaghetti carbonara with side salad, pizza with choicer toppings, burger with choicer toppings, and my favorite, hard shell steak tacos with chili, New Texas style. Wait a minute, Whitaker paused. You serve tacos and chili to a diplomatic entourage? Jeremy frowned for a moment. Well, no, not really. Most of the bureaucrats just wanted burgers and pizza. No taste, no style. Typical DS reps. Only one of them wanted tacos and chili. Who? The general asked impatiently. Him. The chef pointed at the diplomat. The general shut up in his chair and grabbed the intercom. Get Harsha. Yeah, that biotech. Get him in here right now. What? The attaché asked, curiosity overcoming his anger. Just a hunch, the general replied, as Harsha scrambled back into the interview room. General, sir? Harsha asked nervously, looking first at the chef and then at the attaché, then back to the general again, clearly afraid. Calm down, son, Whitaker began. I just need your technical advice. Now you said you had warnings set to trip the atmosphere left certain parameters. Did any of those parameters include, farts? Did they include farts? No, Harsha answered confused. If I included farts in the Atmo warning list, the alarms would be going off every 10 seconds, sir. The attaché said nothing. And you said this, bureaucrat ordered the tacos and chili, right? Be certain. Him, specifically, Whitaker asked the chef. Well, yeah, it was him. And let me tell you, I warned him. He's been having problems, you see, sir, ever since he got here. Sanitation guys had to do some plumbing work in his quarters, if that's all to tell you. They tell me everything, 'cause what I put in, they got to deal with on the way out. But, like a typical Earther, there he went, lording it over me. I know what I can handle, he told the waiter. And then, get this, he complains about it, says it's too hot, didn't have enough beans in it, says he knew New Texan style better than me. Make him second one. What a load, the chef explained, his hands doing half the telling for him. General Whitaker turned around towards Harsha while the attaché slid back into his chair. What's in a fart, Harsha? Chemically. Harsha laughed in spite of himself. Well, mostly a fart is just nitrogen, same as the Atmo, but you get hydrogen, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and methane too. Jeremy giggled in his chair, but Whitaker was all business. So, that list of homeworld trace gases that Krell sent you. Harsha, was there any methane in it? No methane. In fact, now that you mention it, that was kind of odd. Usually you get some sort of everything in trace elements, but the alarms were set to ignore it. Or else, like I said, the delegates themselves probably would have triggered it. The attaché suddenly realized what was happening. What? You think that we did this? Well, the general replied, smirking. The logs ought to tell for sure, but I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to say. And I'm also pretty sure you knew this all along. What? The attaché stood up angrily, spittle flying from the corner of his mouth. I'll make it clear for you, you fucking incompetent, Whitaker said. You farted on the Krell ambassador, and he nearly died from inhaling it. You arse-blasted a fecking alien diplomat so badly, the guy's in a goddamn coma. You dropped a buttquake in the room so terrible, so foul, that even the ambassador's entourage on the other side of his fecking room got sick from it. But no, I didn't, The attaché began nervously. Shut your mouth, moron, Whitaker said. Your arsehole came this close to starting a goddamn war. The attaché fell back in his chair and looked like he was going to die from embarrassment. Dude should have shoved a carb up his cornhole, the chef whispered to Harsha. And you're not out of the woods yet either, Whitaker pointed at the chef. Let this be a lesson to you. Never serve Tex-Mex before a diplomatic function. Clear? The chef gulped visibly. Got it. Off the menu right now, sir. Whittaker rubbed his temples and then pointed at the door. The rest of you, get the feck out of here. Now I've got to call the kraal and apologize for a diplomat expelling poisonous ass gas on their ambassador and explain that somehow we didn't intend to do it. And from now on, all kraal encounters are to be suits only. Christ, what a cluster this is going to be. End of story. Hot Cock, written by Squiggly. Hot Cock. Deep breath and Hot Cock, written by Hot Cock, written by Squigglestorystudios. But that's poison. The arson sat at his desk flipping through the transmission and other paperwork when his secretary Taboo entered his office carrying a silver platter and cover. Good noon, sir. Good noon, Taboo. What do you have there? Well, sir, Secretary Taboo smiled, placing the silver platter on his superior's desk. The chefs wanted you to have the special today while it's hot and fresh. The arson looked suspiciously between the food and his assistant, whose eye stalks began to wobble nervously. Nonsense! I always eat in the mess hall, the arson insisted. He'd built his career on slumming it with the troops, and wasn't about to stop now. Carry it down with us. I've been cooped up in my desk all day. I need to stretch my legs. Sir, I would strongly advise against that. The blue little mollusk descendant tried to dissuade his boss, blocking the doorway and stretching out his arms and eye stalks. But he was simply outmatched and ranked by the towering red avian. Taboo, what is wrong with you? The arson snapped his beak. Well, sir, Taboo sighed. The mess hall is a currently unsafe environment. The arson unfurled his feathers incredulously. An unsafe environment? Aboard an alliance vessel? A Deathworlder's regiment is part of the last pickup, and they've taken over the mess hall for some sort of ritual. Zar raised a quilled eyebrow. Ritual? He questioned. Was it a hazing? I'm sorry, hazing? I think I'll go down to the mess hall. If it is what I think is going on, then it shall be most entertaining. The mess hall was where the many alien species of the Alliance forces congregated to eat, but you currently wouldn't know it. In the back corner, there was a clear and distinct barrier between the regular crew and their Deathworlder guests. A row of empty tables separated the 7 loud humans and 50 or so horrified onlookers. Zarsan didn't make his arrival known, but stood back and watched the most familiar sight to him unfold. Patal! Patal! The Deathworlders chanted as one young recruit poured a red, thick sauce over his regulation ration porridge. The stench of the stuff was enough for everyone to keep their distance. It was noxious and burned the air with its bitterness. Agent Patel swallowed the large spoonful, letting out a roar of victory. The other human commandos slammed their fists onto the metal tables, mimicking the rumbling of a thunderstorm. The rowdy cries and cheers were apparently too much for one attending major, daring to cross the threshold and address the Deathworlder squad. Are you quite finished? The major scoffed, grabbing the attention of the closest agent, who unfortunately was a mountain of muscle and blonde fur. What? This reprehensible decorum you conduct yourself with is unsightly in every possible way. Do you all know who we are? The blonde, muscled human growled. Humans of some description, the major sneered. You're a mortal lot, hard to tell from one first glance. Now the entire group of rowdy humans was silently watching the exchange, the predators before striking their prey. Zarson chuckled under his breath, knowing exactly how this was going to pan out for Major Suach. We're an infiltration unit. Who brought you boys an opening y'all need for the 1st Battalion of Ostark? The blonde muscle folded his arms in front of him. Y'all need to be thanking us agents, or you'd still be waiting for them frigates. It was only now that the Major noticed his apparent size, but was only mildly perturbed. Major Suach arrogance outweighed his common sense because all he heard was the crew's rank and stupidly thought he could throw his command around. Well, I am Major Suach, and I don't care who you are. I will have order in this mess hall. It went down about as well as Zarson expected. The blond mountain of muscle leaned right into the Major's face and belched out in perfect audibility. Make me as old. The Major squealed in pain and began rolling on the floor in pain, by all accounts suffering first-degree burns to his face. The humans roared with laughter, the last man receiving camaraderie high fives, and then he was given a beer. Well, the New Houston Vipers, and you're all stock-eye sons of bitches can get ficked. The man then proceeded to thrust his crotch into the air in a sign of dominance. The rest of the agents fell in line behind their comrade, throwing more sinister jeering at the other members of the mess hall. Zarson was all for a healthy dose of questioning authority, but he had to draw the line at harassment of a fellow Alliance troops. The situation was beginning to get ugly, so he had to handle this delicately, or they could all be suffering from an onslaught of gaseous capsaicin. Zarson stepped forward toward the blonde leader, sizing him up with a cool smile. New Houston Vipers, Do you mind if I borrow this? Zarson pulled a can of mace from the Deathworlder's belt kit and sprayed it in his already contaminated porridge. He then promptly scooped up a loaded spoon into his claw and swallowed with ease. And then another, and another, until he had eaten the entire bowl without breaking a sweat. Zarson dropped the empty bowl on the table before taking a deep breath and bellowing at the humans. You Deathworlders think that you can come aboard this ship and swing your big dicks around expecting everyone to suck it. Well, I am the big cock on this frigate, Admiral Ambassador Zarson, and if I catch any of you sorry maggots waste any more of that chili, I'll see to it that your commander and chief, Chancellor Hartman, knows about it. He reached over for a beer, popping open the cap with his beak and sculling it to make a point. Agents of the United Solar Systems are the finest troops in the Alliance. Can I get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. I said, can I get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. Right, now get your nasty asses to the shower. If you can burp the face of that stupid son of a witch, I don't want to be in range of a thought. Tavu feared for Zarson's life, as much to the astonishment the humans didn't tear him to shreds. Laughters and cheer even. A few of the humans grumbled, but were reassured by their comrades, and soon they began packing up. The Deathworlders were actually listening to the Admiral Ambassador. Sir, that was amazing, Tavu marveled, following after Zarson. Don't be fooled by their bolstering. Deathworlders, especially humans, are just soldiers like you or I. The Admiral Ambassador explained, walking over to the elevator doors and waiting for the doors to open. I've worked alongside hundreds of species, but I'll never forget my time aboard the USS Optimus Prime. Never before or since have I had the pleasure of working alongside a more passionate and loyal bunch. They stepped inside and Zarson pressed the button for down. Sometimes they need a strong hand, or a voice in this case. Humans often communicate through unnecessary yelling. Tavu nodded sagely to the advice of his superior. Sir, where are we heading? To the infirmary, of course. Zarson chittered. What? You see, back when I was just a captain, I was assigned to work aboard the USS OP. Sergeant Hartman told me that avians can't feel the burning of capsaicin, a trick we used to play on privates when I would swallow Carolina Death Reapers whole. But if you can't feel the burning, then why are you headed to the infirmary? Well, I do enjoy a good jelly, but the fermented drink, beer, will eat through my stomach lining, and the alcohol content will most certainly poison my blood. Zarson looked up at the elevator's timekeeper. And I've got about 15 minutes to get my stomach pumped before I'd be deader than Suak's career prospects. Zarson then coughed. splattering a small but sour-smelling cloud. Tavu gulped and took a healthy step back from his superior, lest he be a victim of capsaicin gas of either end. End of story. To Defeat a God, written by JeremiahHellRider. The heavy doors of 10,000-year temple opened with a loud creak, revealing rows of stone pews and altars covered in runes. The creature coughed and sneezed at the stale air, trying to breathe in my dusty halls. He looked around himself, examining the stone main room of the temple, seeing the paintings, murals, and statues built in my name. He started to walk across the old carpet on the floor, slowly making his way in front of the altar. After taking a quick glance at one of the statues, he stopped. He could be waiting for me to speak, or just further inspecting the large statues watching him from the corners of the temple. He finally took out a glass yellow lamp from his pocket and lit the walls. Now I could see the creature. He had hair on his head like others, but also fashioned a long beard with his dark clothes. Since he had managed to come all this way to one of my many homes, it was obvious that the creature knew I would not fulfill the request of every mortal who would come seeking me. Considering how calm he looked, and the amount of effort he must have taken to find me, I assumed that he was at least a little wise or intelligent. What would it be this time? Eternal life, all the knowledge in the universe, 100 virgins. Do you think that I am here to ask something? The creature was not very loud, and there was almost a carelessness, a mockery for sure, but a carelessness in his voice. Was he here to challenge me? Now that's not something you see every millennia. This creature might actually be fun after all. I am not here to challenge you, if that's what you think, but that does not mean I am not here to defeat you either. Not here to challenge me, but to defeat me. This was getting interesting. You are a worthless piece of crap. I've been insulted by many mortals. By worthless was not something I'd heard before. That's right, you are nothing. This was getting fun. The creature probably somehow managed to miss the stories of my power and my strength, so I decided to give him a little show. I started to bend the space inside the temple and created a sort of bubble of air for him so that he may survive my little show without suffocating, because of his puny, mortal lungs. After that, I took the poor thing out of my temple and in seconds brought him to an orbit of a planet in his own solar system, Mars. After making sure the mortal knew where he exactly was, I, with no effort, caused hundreds of nuclear explosions inside the core of the planet, giving the mortal just enough time to witness what my will could achieve before the planet completely broke into 1,000 shards. Then I once again brought him into my temple. But the mortal was not impressed. He even looked bored. Give me 1,000 nuclear missiles, a spaceship, and I can do the same. I once again took him out of the temple, this time bringing him to a black hole 27,000 light-years away. Then with my power, I summoned over 1 million planets from around the galaxy and threw them inside the black hole, letting the mortal see what I could do to the universe. As the space around the black hole started to get dangerous for the mortal, I returned him to the temple. But he looked even more bored. If you consider throwing some lifeless rocks into a hole power, then the average garbage man has as much power as you. I was starting to get frustrated. Perhaps the human valued fame and love over others' physical strength. I'd seen some of the creatures before, so I once again took the human and showed him the hundreds of species across the galaxy who spent their days and night worshipping me, building temples and writing songs in my name, fighting wars just so that they could prove who loved me the most. For once, the human actually looked interested. Once I brought him to the temple, he spoke again. Those civilizations I saw were really powerful. He thought those creatures, my slaves, worshippers, were stronger than me. Why would he think that? I finally broke my silence, and in my deepest, scariest, and commanding voice, I said, "Human, you say I am weak. You say my subjects hold more power compared to me. Then explain yourself. Why would me, a being that can manipulate every atom and particle across the universe, who has seen and heard all that has ever been and who could live forever, would be weaker than a puny creature such as you? The human for once looked mildly surprised. Perhaps he was expecting me to destroy some more galaxies before speaking. You are weak because you can manipulate, but not create. Not create? I created almost everything in the universe, billions of planets, all my hard work. Nonsense, human. I created the universe. I made your puny planet from dust, and I put the first life on your planet. You did not create Earth or life on it. You stole it. Steal it? From who? I made everything. No, you did not. Since your coming to the universe, you have not made a single thing that you can call your own. Let's give you an example. Build me a statue. While the human giving orders to me was slightly insulting, I quickly remade one of the statues I had seen my slaves build. A weird stone monster wielding a sword. See, human, I create my own art. No, you stole that statue from one of your slave planets. You recreated what was already made. You did not add anything to it, or made something new. This was getting stupid. Of course, I could create something new, and I could show it to that damn human. I once again started to manipulate some of the stone inside the temple, and I would turn these humble rock into a glorious, I could not think of anything to make. Only the statues and monuments built by slaves and the life around the universe came to my mind. Why couldn't I think of something that does not exist? My slaves could look at trees and make tree people. Imagine how I would look despite having never seen me. You see, you can't make anything new. You may have dropped the first life on this planet, but you did not shape it. You did not color the flowers on the ground. You did not create the birds in the sky. You just let life evolve and then say that you made it. You did not even make this planet itself. You just saw what all the other planets with life were like and copied it. Was he right? Life existed around the universe for as long as I remembered. I would just take life from one planet and place it on another that could sustain it, then wait until it evolved into something. No, this is impossible. With all my might, I summoned a four-legged small furry animal from the human's planet. I would show him what life I would create, how I would turn this filthy animal into something that would have a mark of a god. Try placing a tail on it, maybe. The human was almost mocking me. Why couldn't I think of something to make the animal better? I could no longer hold the anger inside me. You filthy human! You can't make your puny art, but that doesn't matter because I can still just crush you to death with my fist. This is true power. Prepare to meet your The human was smiling, almost laughing. Human! What are you doing? I'm about to end your life. The human finally got a hold of himself and spoke. My entire life I pissed off people. I started annoying people in school, then on the internet. I showed them how they were wrong, weak, ugly, stupid. This was my final goal. To make the most egotistic megalomaniac being out there scream and rage. But why? Because I am the greatest troll who has ever trolled. End of story. Peace at Any Cost, written by EchoingCascade. Captain Ishmali was troubled. The war was not going well. Then again, it wasn't going badly either. As a matter of fact, the war just wasn't, going at all. A week ago, the Morrind, long-time rival to his people of the Mist, had laid claim to a large, life-sustaining planet on the edge of their territory. His government's response was swift, decisive, and purely motivated by spite. They claimed it was their planet by some ancient prophecy that was still currently being forged to look authentic. The Mist had landed a small army on the north side of the main continent, while the Morrind were in possession of the south. This would have normally been settled with the standard bouts of political posturing, a small skirmish here and there, and finally some sort of agreement no one involved would be happy with. What the human politicians call a good compromise. Yet, it was not meant to be. As it turns out, the planet was rich in soul crystals, the main resource needed for FTL drives. Worse still, the largest vein was situated in the middle of both armies. Before either army could secure it, a human cargo ship had an accident. 3,000 endangered animals from their home world were on board, and when the ship crashed, they were deposited on top of the mine. The humans apologized profusely and asked for some time to gather the specialists necessary to recapture the creatures. His people and the Misked had no choice but to agree. The Mornid were military allies of the Deathworlders, and his people traded almost exclusively with them. No one bought the idea that this was an accident, though. The dumbest, most inbred noble either nation could proffer, still qualified as sentient, could see the humans wanted to avoid the old rivalry becoming an open war, but neither side could openly call them liars, which suited Captain Ishmani just fine, actually. After all, the longer combat was avoided, the longer he and his troops could stay alive, which happened to be one of his favorite pastimes. Yet, things were not going to last much longer, it seemed. After a week of waiting for the humans to gather the right handlers, Major Barsht had decided that it was high time to make his move. The man had tried to approach the creatures, which the humans insisted to be very territorial and somewhat aggressive. At first, he tried to reason with them, to no effect. He then tried to bribe them with food. This seemed to work, at least for a moment. As he tried to walk past them, one of the creatures attacked him and was quickly followed by several of his peers. The Major survived, though he and those pulled him out while they were severely injured. The demons didn't so much as bite as rip pieces off of anyone that got close enough to them. Worse, they gave chase and even tried to attack the armored vehicles. Perhaps the humans were not lying when they claimed the need for experts to deal with these abominations. The Major recuperated in a healing pod and, to his credit, only looked somewhat traumatized by the experience. He gathered all the troops to push through the animals with tanks and flame units in order to frighten them away. These monsters either don't care or are personally insulted by the use of deadly weapons in their immediate vicinity. Most animals see a large tank roll their way and they scatter. You fire a plasma flamer at them and they can't run fast enough in the opposite direction. Not these ones. The Morins, who had been watching the scene, had at first found it funny, and then tried to join the demons in attacking us, probably thinking that they would see them as allies. Big mistake. The creatures didn't see them as anything more than extra enemies to chase away. On the plus side, we won't be going to war today either, or anytime soon for that matter. On the other hand, both we and the Morins have suffered quite a bit of damage. Not many casualties, but the mental toll was large. I wouldn't be surprised if they called the whole thing off. The creatures have increased their territory. Like conquering barbarians, they now lay claim to what used to be the Misked and Mornid outposts. The bastards actually look proud of themselves. We are leaving the planet the next morning. No one argued against the decision. General Armstrong was reading the report on the Misked-Mornid conflict of XN 2003. Thanks to fast thinking on his part, war was avoided and both sides were leaving the planet. Someone knocked on the general's door. General Armstrong, "Come in." It was his secretary, Pauline. She nodded a short salute and gave him a datapad. General Armstrong took it and scanned the title. Misked and Mornid Joint Demands. General Armstrong. And this is... Secretary Pauline. Reparation demands for war crimes for the use of bioweapons. General Armstrong chuckled a bit and put the datapad in a nearby trash can. General Armstrong. Ha! Come on! It was just a couple thousand ducks. How bad could it be? He looked at his secretary, and she looked worried and wasn't leaving. She clearly had more to say. General Armstrong. Is something wrong? Secretary Pauline. Well, sir, the animals that were to crash on XN 2003 were supposed to be ducks. But the officers simply couldn't get their hands on the numbers we needed, so she stopped talking. This was a woman who routinely informed him of system-wide wars and casualties in the billions. The general was worried now. General Armstrong, What did we dump on that planet? Secretary Pauline. 3,000, Canadian geese, sir, during their nesting season. General Armstrong didn't move, blink, or breathe for a couple seconds. Then he fished the datapad out of the trash can and began to read it. He quickly stopped. General. Pauline, please contact the diplomatic corps ASAP and call my personal lawyer, please. End of story. All Systems Science University, 8/25, written by apophis-pegasus. On the borders of Eurasian space. No matter where, what, or who you are in the galaxy, hostage negotiations rely on three very simple questions. What do the hostage takers want? What are they willing to do to the hostages to get it? And how do you make sure that the hostages get out safe? In this particular case, what the hostage takers of the ASSU science vessel Tensor wanted was simple. Money. An old classic. They were pirates, after all. What are they willing to do to get it? Anything it took, generally. How would the hostages be saved? Well, that was the 5 billion credit question, wasn't it? 50 million credits, no less! The large, battle-scarred Eurasian paced back and forth in front of the Tensor's view screen. On the other end, on a ship a few light minutes out, sat several hostage negotiators. A member of the Far Asian High Treasury, a heavily armed tactical response team, and a priestess, just in case. Ma'am, such a large sum of money cannot be moved immediately, the treasurer replied. We must have more time. You've had more than enough time. The treasurer drew herself up to a full, albeit unimpressive, for a Far Asian height. Madame, we have to institute an emergency requisition. File taxes on that requisition, submit an HWUD form in a high treasury, institute an emergency transport order, convert the credits into hard currency, transport that hard currency to liftoff, file the emergency resource transportation request, ratify that request. As she droned on, the pirate captain looked more and more confused with each passing item of the list. Finally, she had enough and cut her off. Fine! How much time do you need? Half a day or thereabouts, beamed the treasurer. Thank you for your... The vid screen went blank, cutting off the remaining words she had to say. One of the hostage negotiators turned to the treasurer with a worried look on her face. Do you think it'll take long? Spirit, no. The money's ready. I just thought that I'd buy you all more time. Grinning, the negotiator opened up her mouth to reply, but was abruptly interrupted by a ruckus just outside the door. Move! Move, you giant furry bundles of militarism! Those are my students there! Move, I say! The negotiation room's door slid open with a slight hiss, and in trundled the headmaster of All Systems Science University. A portly Trevelyan strode to the back of the room and glared at the assembled team. Where are they? I want to see them. One of the negotiators made a calming gesture as she attempted to placate the quivering headmaster. All right, calm down. We've tried to get the captain on the line. Somewhat mollified, the headmaster sat down in a chair, massaging the base of his siphons. Looking up, he stared imploringly at the negotiator. How bad is it? The negotiator fixed a tense look on her face as she replied. Not good. These pirates, they're a particularly nasty bunch. Even if we give them the money, they'll probably decide to terminate the hostages. Leave no evidence. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. We'll do our best that we can. The headmaster massaged harder, groaning in frustration. Currently his tenure was far too active for his liking. First, the humans, now this. It was too much. The beep in the comms unit caused everyone to look up. The pirate captain was calling back. Her snarling visage filled one half of the view screen, with the other half filled with the varied huddled forms of students, sequestered in what looked like the ship's laboratory complex. The students looked unharmed for the most part, But unhappy faces were rife amongst the myriad of Varaxians, Padukians, Digonians, Varasians. Humans. Humans in a laboratory. Huh. The headmaster had an idea, a risky one, but an idea nonetheless. I would like to talk to one of them. He pointed at the lanky, dark-haired human. One. The pirate captain growled in her throat. I am not your butler, Trevelyan. Turning to the hostage rescue team, he fixed them with a pleading look. Eventually, the treasurer spoke up. There'll be an extra 10 million credits in it for you. The pirate captain mulled it over. Grunting in assent, she left the view screen and returned shortly with the disgruntled-looking hostage in question. Covering him upside the head, she growled, Speak, and no funny business. Leaning forward, the headmaster addressed the young man. Hello there. Who is it? How is everybody? Rubbing his head, the Korean replied, Fine for the most part. Nobody's been hurt. We're complying and all that jazz. How many of you are there? About 250 total. It was a smaller expedition. The headmaster cut him off. No. How many of you are there? Glancing nervously at the incredulous glares now fixed on the headmaster, Jehu replied, about 25. Any specifics? Well, me, Hatham, Jim, Ophi, Jordan, Rick. The headmaster swallowed. Good. Well, I just wanted to tell you that 825 has been waived here, so you all should be safe and sound soon enough. Jehu froze, taking his hand off his head and staring at the headmaster with an intense look. The headmaster stared back, unblinking. Around him, the hostage negotiation team looked around in confusion. 825? What was that? Eventually, G spoke, slowly and deliberately. That's good. I'm sure everybody will be glad to hear that. G was promptly hauled off screen as the pirate captain stepped back into view. Now that display of favoritism is over with, where is... Her tirade was abruptly cut off as the view screen went blank. A few seconds were spent as the hostage rescue team looked at each other in confusion. The confusion was resolved as all heads turned towards the headmaster, with his finger pressed on the cut-link button. Are you insane? What is wrong with you? The sub-minister's daughter is on board. What are you going to do? You do not ever hang up on a hostage taker. Do you want your students to die? Spirit above, you just doomed those people. Ignoring the lot of them, the headmaster sat back down, seemingly content to let them lambast him. The yelling was cut short as an explosion burst from Tense's aft section. Sparkling debris floated free, the atmosphere vented in white clouds, only to be curbed by the emergency shield stemming from the breach. All sets of eyes in the negotiation room glared at the headmaster with a cold fury. He responded by taking out a pack of human cigarettes, igniting one, and drawing deeply. Gesturing lazily at the comms unit, he drawled, You should get a call back at any minute now. As if on cue, the console beeped. The view screen activated to show the pirate captain looking in a bad way. Half of her face was singed, and she was leaning heavily on the comms unit's desk. Emergency lights blared red around her, and a hellish mixture of gunfire and screams sounded in the distance. What the hell did you do? The negotiator stepped forward. Ma'am, we don't know what you're talking about, but I implore you not to harm the hostages. We had nothing to do with the... I am through with your lies. Now The headmaster sat back in his chair with a slow smile appearing on his trunked features. His serene appearance contrasted with the pure bedlam that he had unleashed. Again? Why would you do that? The headmaster wordlessly pointed at the comms unit. The blinking comms unit. The pirate captain looked in bad shape. Burns littered her face and upper body, and her left arm trailed limply at her side. Standing, shaking, she affixed a terrified look at the negotiation room. All right, you can have them back. The console beeped again. Please, spirits above, we give up. The negotiators just stared open-mouthed at the view screen, not even bothering to stop the headmaster. Nudging forward, the priestess spun the headmaster around and mouthed, 825. The headmaster reached into his tunic and pulled out a computer slate and turned it to her. Rule number 825. In the event of a hostage or lockdown emergency, students are instructed to fully comply and refrain from confrontation to the best of their ability. Rule 825.1. In the event of 20 well-equipped humans, this rule can be waived under specific circumstances. All attempts must be made for an ethical victory. The console beeped again. The vid screen lit up with a distorted image. Intermittent burns of clarity revealing scorched walls, assaulted rifles, and sparking equipment. I want my mommy! All eyes now turned to the priestess, who had a large grin on her face as she pressed the cutlink button. What? It's great fun. End of story. Fire in the Hole, written by Rosie013. Gorag looked across the cafeteria table at the smugly grinning human. The latest bet had to be a trap. The last few bets had been way too easy. Now the hairless herbivore was suggesting double or nothing. It wasn't just the human's stupid face, but its eyes seemed to be smiling. Definitely a trap. But what else was Gorag to do? He was representing his entire homeworld here. As the latest species to be indoctrinated into the galactic community, his kind was still new, untested. As a Deathworlder, it was his responsibility to not only make a good and peaceful first impressions, but to unsubtly remind the others that his people were stronger in almost every way. So naturally, when the herbivore species had challenged him to an eating competition, he had hardly said no. It would be a good way to prove dominance and get a little food-based cultural exchange with this bold individual. Human, it called itself. It had then smiled at him, a facial gesture that clearly meant the same thing between our people, and announced that it was also a Deathworlder. No tusks, no claws, and the very soft-looking skin. There was no way that it could back up its claim. The challenge was personal now. He would beat the stupid human in his own game so hard that it would be begging for mercy. But it hadn't happened. The food had come quick and fast, and the contestants taking turns to introduce the other to the food native to their respective homeworlds by sharing the dish. Gorag would never admit it, but he had actually lost count of how much the two of them had eaten. It had been quite an experience, and a sizable crowd of onlookers had gathered. Even if he lost now, his people would have gained some measure of respect from those watching his feats. He wouldn't lose, of course. He had nearly lost the contents when eating the heavily solanine-laced tuber from the human diet, but had managed to push through. He had gotten his own back when the human hesitated at the traditional dish of zingabayan, or ginger, as he called it after a tentative sniff. Despite its ridiculous claim, the human was admittedly tough. Finally, the human had declared that it was full and double or nothing on one last challenge. A little fruit for dessert. Something called a Carolina Reaper. A small, red, pleasant-smelling fruit so small that it was almost a berry. Trap or not, Gorag would not lose now. His pride and wallet couldn't afford it at this point. He tossed the fruit into his tusk maw, and he began to chew. It burnt! It felt like he had eaten a hot coal. No! Put his tongue on red-hot steel, like a million needles in his face, like chewing on broken glass. Without warning, he began to cry. He tried swallowing the horrible fruit anyway. The damned human had fed him capsaicin of all things. My kind of maniac species willingly ate the stuff. The crowd was going wild. Some watching in shock and awe, but most were enthusiastically cheering him on. There were even medics waiting to the sidelines now. It belatedly occurred to him that he might not be the first person to try human food. The realization spurred his anger. He had been walked right into this. He would show them all and push through. After a few long, agonizing, burning minutes in his own personal purgatory, Gorog opened his mouth to show the human that he had won. The human just smiled and said to meet him back here in a cycle's time, before pushing away his untouched plate and getting up to leave. Gorak angrily grabbed a hold of the hairless herbivore and demanded his winnings. He had gone through hell to win, and there was no way the human could just slip away without paying. The human smiled again, but something about it this time sent off warning bells in Gorak's head. The human carefully explained that this was only the first half of the Carolina Reaper's effects, and that the second half would be experienced soon at the other end of the digestive tract. The crowd fell silent. As the tears flowed forth anew at the realization, Gorak knew that he had lost to his fellow Deathworlder. The dastardly human had never intended to eat his own death fruit. End of story. Every cell in my brain is in excruciating pain, and I will never transport humans again. Written by Ortsmeiser. Disgusting apes. Their worst, most terrible customers that you can imagine. Every time I encounter one, I am faced with a near irresistible desire to tear my appendages from my head. In all my time captaining and ferrying creatures around the galaxy, and never once have I seen a species so mind-numbingly frustrating as these. I thought this was great for business. I took a look at their documents, including a biological overview, and saw nothing immediately worrying. Besides, it would be interesting to be around a new species for a little bit. I allowed them on board, and that was a mistake. Immediately after they were allowed on board, I had second thoughts. By no means were they the most massive sapient species, but they were absolutely the tallest. The structure containing their sensory organs and brain was almost always in jeopardy of impacting low-hanging door frames, pipes, and miscellaneous objects. This was mediated by their bony cranium, which was suspiciously well adapting to resisting blunt force trauma. They moved with an unnatural grace on their unreasonably long legs, propelled by bands of alien muscle strung to calcified endoskeleton. Their chattering was so fast, the auto-translator spattered out a barely cohesive mess of jabber that barely registered as speech. The bio-overview stated that their brains worked much more rapidly than normal, necessitating a resting period lasting 1/3 of the circadian cycle to account for the waste buildup. But it was unnerving to see in person. There was something off about these creatures. I couldn't quite discern it, but their overview included details that I couldn't reconcile with their alleged desire for mutual betterment. And later that cycle, my suspicions were proven correct. One of the food management staff burst into the bridge, babbling hysterically about the humans in the mess hall. I arrived there to find a gaggle of humans, some clad in considerably less clothing than they had arrived in, and all of them surrounded by empty canisters of cooking fuel. I respectfully inquired as to what the name of the fuck they were doing, drinking all of the cooking fuel. I was simultaneously aghast at their seemingly suicidal tendencies and in awe of their ability to tolerate such improbable doses of literal poison. An ethanol-based fluid had been provided for them so they could heat their food, a courtesy I had trusted them with. I was under the impression that the heightened processing speed of their brains was an indicator of high intelligence, and therefore a functioning self-preservation instinct. As it would turn out, their intelligence was only marginally above baseline. Their efficient brains simply allowed them to be stupid faster than any known species. As the humans assisted in stumbling back to their quarters, they were asked why they had consumed all the cooking fuel. They apparently mistook the clearly labeled canisters for beverages. When told that the labels marked the contents as highly flammable and poisonous, the humans simply stated that they couldn't read Galactic Basic and didn't care and refused to elaborate further. Following the incident, I double-checked the bio overview in order to gain an insight as to why they enjoyed poisoning themselves so much. As it would turn out, humans have a remarkable tolerance to most known toxins. They regularly poison themselves. It's a core component of the culture. And have taken down or synthesized a truly staggering number of substances for the sole purpose of disrupting the brains and bodily functions. And their brain function was certainly disrupted. Not long after they'd been led back to their quarters to sleep off the super dose of poison they enthusiastically consumed, I had to deploy medical staff to one of their rooms. Apparently, 2 of the heavily inebriated males began engaging in physical combat over a dispute as to who got to sleep at the top bunk. Combat is not uncommon in most species, but this was different. They didn't do harmless wrestling like most species to establish dominance or something similar. They were violently percussing each other's faces with their upper limbs, spraying body fluids on the floor of each other. Instead of preventing them from beating each other to death, the other humans cheered on the one they liked the most while attempting to record the altercation on crude camera computers that they seemed to have at all times. Their strikes left visible dents in the walls and floor, hinting of a worrying amount of strength. One of the males hit it particularly hard under the mandible and collapsed to the ground. The victorious one, luckily, did not continue to beat his adversary to death, and instead allowed him to be carried to the medical bay. Before getting to the medical bay, the defeated human woke up, jumped out of the carrying cart that he'd been placed in, and refused medical attention, and attempted to find and consume more cooking fuel. He treated his wounds by rubbing his garments all over them, and returned to his quarters. After the rest period, they made up and were friends again. Upon their return to the mess hall for breakfast, they all seemed to be in a state of great lethargy and irritability. They began dissolving a black powdered mixture into boiling water, which they had to ask for. They were not allowed to have any more cooking fuel. The resulting beverage was full enough of caffeine to kill every non-human passenger on the ship 10 times over, and they consumed it anyways. Instead of engaging in recreational activities, as was expected from them, they returned to their quarters and continued resting well past the usual periods for hours. During this time, they consumed copious amounts of water and refused to speak to or cooperate with anyone except medical staff. They attempted to convince staff to give them drugs, claiming to have a condition called a hangover, despite there not being clear evidence of injuries, and their requests were denied to prevent any more intoxicated human incidents. The next cycle was still short of ideal. A concerned cleaning worker investigated grunts of exertion coming from the lavatory, fearing for the safety of its occupant. A medical worker was dispatched for assistance. Space food can cause gastrointestinal distress in some species. As it would turn out, it was not one human, but 2. And there was no intestinal issues. The medical worker thought the humans were fighting and attempted to break them up. Both humans pushed the worker from the lavatory, closed and locked the door, and continued with what they were doing. As it turned out, they weren't fighting, they were mating. This event prompted staff to avoid isolated humans as much as possible, which was probably a mistake. Staff failed to discover the projectile launches a few humans had constructed from literal garbage in time to stop another incident from occurring. The humans used their ping-pong ball guns to engage in a mock fight with each other. There were 7 staff casualties. When access to garbage was denied, the humans instead took to bludgeoning each other in sword fights, with whatever long, sturdy objects they could find. It would appear that most of their recreational activities involve either abject violence or fierce competition, and they will weaponize anything given to them. Upon their departure, I still found traces of their peculiar behavior. They'd taken every complimentary bar of body cleaning solvent and had deliberately left behind some currency in their rooms, perhaps as a form of payment for the appropriated toiletries. This behavior has been noted, and is consistent with the behaviors observed by other sapient species that had the misfortune of catering for these devilish creatures. For these reasons, I have indefinitely suspended any and all services to humans. If they want to travel through civilized space on my ship, they can, as they phrase it, kiss my ass. I don't care if they call me a speciesist. It's not happening. I'll guarantee nobody would last a week with these monstrosities. Either let them use the godforsaken fabric of reality-tearing warp drives of death, or sell them some safe ones. I don't care how you do it, just don't let them on ships containing other species unless you want a dozen staff injuries because of a particularly aggressive game of tennis. End of chapter. Humans Don't Make Good Familiars, written by Dragfie. Around me, all that could be heard was pencils fitting in multiple choice bubbles. Some determined, some less so to get a good enough result to get into university of their owner's choice. I wasn't too stressed since the generic engineering course I wanted to enter wasn't particularly hard to get in, and I happened to not suck at math. As it happened, we were 10 minutes into the mid-year math exam when under me a bright geometric patterned circle appeared illuminating the room. Startled, I looked up, but no one seemed to notice, and the examination supervisor was staring daggers right at me. That was when everything went dark. Just as fast as it disappeared, the world came back into view again. Except my view was full of little multicolored feathered bird nymphs staring at me. Surprised, I staggered back before I managed to balance myself and looked around the room I was in. The roof was just above my head, but assuming the 20-centimeter tall bird fairies, the only other living thing in the room, were what this room was designed for. It looked more like a sports hall. In fact, those were definitely some kind of gymnastics bars, and those were definitely for climbing, and those were no doubt for the goals of some kind of game. Turning my attention back to the nymphs, I could definitely recognize a couple amongst them which seemed to look a little larger, duller colored, and dressed in what definitely made them look more, professional. There was one standing in front of the crowd of younger nymphs, seemingly holding them back behind an invisible line, while behind the crowd stood 3 who definitely looked more, apprehensive. My attention finally rested on the bright blue bird nymph facing me, and standing in front of all the others. It looked like it was fidgeting, peering up at me with upturned eyes. "Purpetiao," it chirped, and as it did I felt encouragement, demand, and I should tell them who I am, and I guess they wouldn't know. "Hey, I'm Jake," I said to the crowd at large, waving my hand. The group of brightly colored nymphs exploded into a cacophony of shushed chirps, which strongly reminded me of excited whispering when someone did something amazing, but that someone also was in your class, which meant whatever you did was going to be compared to it. The 4 who I was starting to suspect were teachers seemed to relax a little, but their gazes stayed wary. The little blue one at the front seemed to gain a little confidence, straightening its back while its face was getting what seemed to be just a little bit brighter. "Purpetiao," it chirped, and once again, but this time I felt authority, submission, and, I should come to my master. Wait, master? I cannot keep her waiting. What? Why can't I keep who waiting? How did I know? No! I must walk to her. What the feck? Why am I thinking? Go to her! Holy shit, this is mind control. Go to her now! Get out of my head! As I yelled, the crowd of birds shrank away, falling completely silent. Even the 4 what seemed to be teachers looked stunned, but quickly recovered and readied what looked like intricately decorated wooden sticks. In the silence, the blue one repeated nervously, "Peru." Nervousness demand obedience, and I should know. This time the crowd scattered, chirping desperately as they flapped over each other. The 3 teachers at the back were prepared this time. Chirping in sync, the 3 gestured towards what looked like a jagged rock between them, sitting on a trolley, and motioned towards me, followed by the rock doing the same at a speed of a pegged handball. Out of pure instinct, my hand came forward, and around the room resounded a loud snap, followed by a louder "fuck!" The mayhem instantly came to a stop as the little feathered heads turned towards the source of the sound. I took the rock out of my right hand with my left and looked at the broken pencil that I must have been holding this whole time. It had snapped, and one of the 2 broken halves was protruding a little into my palm. "That hurt!" I shouted, throwing the rock back in the general direction it came from. The stone flew and buried itself halfway into the floorboards right in front of one of the teacher nymphs, who staggered back and fell over with what in hindsight must have been utter horror, judging from the facial expression. The 4th teacher was shaking the little blue nymph and chirping some things, while the rest of the students were softly stampering out of the room, bouncing against each other and the walls as they pushed open the large double doors. That's when I finally realized the gravity of what had probably happened. "Get her up!" I looked down at the little blue nymph chirping something again, but this time I didn't feel anything. Confused, I looked around and down at myself, only to see my legs disappearing. "Holy crap!" I exclaimed, as quickly my stomach, hands and chest faded into nothing. The last thing I saw before the world faded into darkness was the little blue nymph sitting on her behind, hands supporting her back, staring at me in what looked like shocked confusion. And then I was back. Students writing, the supervisor staring daggers at me. I was back. Glancing at the clock, it still said 10 minutes past the start of the exam. And why does my hand feel? I glanced down and saw my pencil, broken with a little blood and trickling down from my palm. It was almost a year since that strange encounter, and I graduated high school without any issues. I didn't tell anyone about the experience of that day, being strangely similar to what was popular in the pop culture trends at the moment. At first, I immediately thought that I must have been sent to another world, only to realize that objectively more likely scenarios which wouldn't get me laughed at. In spite of my efforts, I didn't see any of my friends jumping out and saying, "It's just a prank, bro," or "Gotcha," or even cryptic lines which may or may not be a reference to what happened. Nor could I find anything strange in what I ate that day, nor any opportunities for anyone to have slipped me something in my drinks. The supervisor didn't say anything about the pencils instantly becoming snapped, other than some bitchy incredulity about how hard I had to be holding it to somehow manage that. So I ended up writing it off as a mystery, but it got me thinking. If I did get summoned to another world and it happened like some of the stories I read, would I be ready? Since my answer to that was a solid no, I decided to do something about it. My sudden obsession with scientific and engineering knowledge actually ended up helping my final semester at high school, even if the new archery, martial arts, fencing and firearm classes didn't. I was now well into my first semester at uni, studying a flexible first-year engineering and science course, and I had started to doubt that anything was going to come of that strange experience. It was until one day at the firing range, as I was raising my rented Glock 34, the same geometrical pattern appeared on everything and went dark. Opening my eyes, there was the same bright blue bird nymph sitting down, leaning against the wooden wall behind it. This time, I was determined not to do anything which might spook it and lose my chance at a proper understanding. So I steeled myself to resist but not overreact to what will come next. It chirped weakly, and like last time, I felt my mind trying to convince me to do something. But this time, fear, grief, desperation. And it wasn't trying to order, it was pleading. This time, I understood it immediately. That chirp was, "Help me." Setting my face in a grim determination, I nodded to the poor creature and turned around to a scene of destruction. We were in what looked like the miniature great hall whose roof was just as tall enough for me to fit. But the tables lay on their sides, broken and cracked, with more of the little bird nymphs littering the floor, many in pools of red blood with the sickening injuries. In the middle of them all, now with its attention fully focused on me, was a massive monster. Massive for the nymphs, that is. It really was about the size of a large dog, reaching about my chest on all fours, and was best described as a bastard child of a lizard and a hedgehog. The monster tensed its muscles, opened its mouth, and screamed. An unnatural fear came over me, but it wasn't anywhere near as strong as the birdie's suggestions, only causing me to tense and clench my fists, causing me to notice what I still held in my hand. I raised my gun and fired, seemingly instantly, as it is with the speed of what it travels. There was a spark in front of the creature's forehead, a spray of red behind its head, accompanied by the sound of a metallic snap and then the squelch of exploding brains. The monster's screams stopped and it stood still, frozen in time, then slowly fell forward onto its stomach where it lay unmoving. I wanted to help the other birds, but my head was still processing what just happened. Then I just freak up. What if that was a person? I mean, it does have blood all over its claws and around its mouth, but what if it was a mistake? And all of these nymph things, how can I? My thoughts were interrupted by a single chirp from behind me. Turning around, I felt amazement, relief, morning. I smiled. At least I had done something right by this one, and replied, "Any time." After hearing my words, the little nymph sunk back against the wall, closed its eyes, and lay there still. Just then, I heard frantic chirps getting louder from the corridors, presumably connected to the hall by doors situated at regular intervals on the walls. Turning around, I noticed I was fading again. My legs were already gone, my hands, chest, and then I saw the source of the chirps. Larger, more professional-looking nymphs holding what I could only describe as staves poured through one of the doors. One of them, a tall, for their standards, green-colored one, caught my gaze just as I completely disappeared. End of story. Where is the anti-monitor? Why do you need him? Written by Admiral Marsupial 3. Those of us who know of, can see, or travel to other parts of the multiverse know 3 things to be true. Number 1, fuck is the most versatile word ever created in any universe ever. Number 2, no matter what universe they are in, humans are fecking insane. Number 3, the non-human inhabitants of universe 976 KDD94 are the most sympathized with poor unlucky frickers in the entire multiverse. Point 3 was directly related to point 2. Humans are the most insane species in almost every universe they inhabit, and in a few that they don't. That is, more due to some event making the humans more reserved rather than the craziness of the more insane race. These universes are collectively known as lucky feckers. In most of them, the humans lack self-preservation or acceptance of the limits of the laws of physics, can make things, interesting. Across the multiverse, they've come up with every possible perversion of nature, every slap in the face of God, and every way of saying feck you to people that say you can't do that. In Universe 37 GMY 875, they were the first in all the multiverse to actually go faster than the speed of light. Not warping space, not using wormholes, hyperspace, substance, or any other sort of space. They actually broke the light barrier. They then used the technology to make projectiles that they could fire at their enemies. It ended about as well as you probably guessed. In Universe 9865GD42, they solved subatomic reconstruction, a technology that could usher in a post-scarcity society for everyone and turn the universe into a paradise. the first thing they did was make 100 plus meter tall atomic lizards. In Universe 13738ET44, the otherwise known as the stickiest universe, Rule 34 became the dominant art form of the galaxy. If you are one of the lucky, unlucky, fricking perverted bastards who are legally allowed to view this universe, we recommend thoroughly sterilizing your viewer before use. In Universe 48368TSU5, the humans developed a psychic ability where their thoughts were projected to everyone around them. This was known as the universe where everyone cried themselves to sleep. This sort of story was repeated across billions of universes. If you didn't want humans to do something, you didn't tell them it was dangerous. You didn't tell them that it was inefficient. You definitely didn't tell them that they could do it. In fact, in many of the smarter universes, these 3 rules were in a literal handbook of how to get humans to do something. No, you tried to convince them that it was actually really boring and hoped, against all hope, that they didn't work out that you were full of shit. And there was poor Universe 976 KDD94. In this universe, the humans did it all. Atomic lizards, an entire Rule 34 galaxy, with atomic lizards doing things that are best avoided if you don't want to be compelled to pour strong acid into your eyes. Weapons that would be intergalactic crimes anywhere else. They somehow managed to make the color red actually make things go faster, as well as an almost infinite amount of other fecking insane bollocks that resulted in the universe renaming the laws of physics to those bullcrap suggestions that don't apply to those fecking crazy space lemurs for some reason. They actually did that. There was a ceremony for the renaming and everything. Most of the humans watched the ceremony with a tear in their eye and pride in their hearts. Now, of course, because the universe is a cruel fecking bitch that hates us all, they discovered that they weren't the only universe and how to cross over. Universe 1GHYF408 was the first to be visited. Unfortunately, they didn't have humans and were actually thrilled to meet the new exciting friends. After the initial meeting and exchanging of history and culture, they took one for the team, promptly decided that death was preferable to opening further relations, and destroyed their own universe by triggering a second Big Bang. But not before creating billions of falsified scientific documents and test results to convince the humans that there were only 2 universes. They were recognized as heroes to the rest of us, apart from Huckleberry from the Wushitane race. He was known officially throughout the multiverse as the dumbest fecking moron to ever exist, and the fecker who probably doomed us all. In all, the billions of scientific documents that had been given to the humans to convince them of the 2-universe theory was a summary of one experiment written by Huckleberry that contained the line, "You can't find other universes, it's dangerous to try and would just consume resources needlessly." They had a working prototype to find the rest of us within 6 months of reading this report. Luckily, I saw the report before anyone else, and immediately bought shares in therapy providers, hazmat suit makers, and manufacturers of lubricant and cleaning wipes. If you must watch the fiery, sperm-filled collapse of your culture and civilization, you may as well do it from the expensive comfy chair in a luxurious mansion, watching it all on a TV the size of the moon. End of story. Earth's Greatest Export, written by Digital 332006. Contrary to what most people would believe, first contact with an alien species wasn't all that we thought it would be. There was no fighting, no awe and wonder from the aliens or ourselves regarding each other. No, It was mostly paperwork. A whole bunch of it. The galaxy at large functioned on an ever-expanding bureaucracy, which employed millions of workers, all trying to juggle the complexities of laws, treaties, and various aspects of diplomacy. As such, when humanity was discovered, thousands of galactic employees were sent to begin the arduous task of making sure humans complied, understood, and executed the millions of regulations that existed. Rarely, but it did happen, a species would be found that was completely incompatible with the way the rest of the universe worked. Fanatic purifiers, hive minds, determined exterminators, to name a few. In those cases, the solution usually involved confining them to their home planet or more extreme measures should that not be possible. Indeed, nothing may halt the ever-spinning gear that is the galactic bureaucracy. Humans adapted well enough to the galactic bureaucracy, only a few countries stubbornly fighting some of the laws. After everything settled down and humans tried entering the galactic market, they found it impossible to make a profit. It was a losing gambit to try and compete with civilizations that had the full power of the sun at their disposal, driving energy costs very low. Only very specific types of businesses saw any profits, those that dealt with specialized goods and service sector. Humans were nothing remarkable. Resilient, yes, but that was not something marketable. Strength was another factor. Humans were among the top 10 physically strongest species, but robotics made that obsolete. Due to multiple millennia of religiously following the rules, the Xenos of the universe lacked what many humans would call a spine, both simply accepting their fate and resigning themselves to whatever happened to them. Humans, on the other hand, often made their discontent apparent, complaining about all perceived injustices, real or not. What made them excel in the service sector was what contemporaries called currents. Many Earth-based companies began hiring regular average humans and training them to fill in such roles, turning galactic human economy to one of service. Available in 3 distinct levels, Xenos have the option of having a current, a lawyer, or an angry drill sergeant. The different models of personal assistant human, now referred to as a PAH, all come with a satisfaction guarantee warranty. The current model helps in getting better customer service, special rebates, and speaking directly with the manager. The second model is aimed at those that dealt with more dangerous individuals. The angry drill sergeant strikes fear in over 99% of the known Xenos simply with its verbal abuse. Trained in multiple fighting styles, the ADS-PHA is not simply all bark, it has bite. Last but not least, to help those more white-collar type career, the lawyer human can help find even the most elusive legal loopholes, protecting their employer's assets and personal freedom. Here are some of the reviews of satisfied customers. I used to have a hard time standing in myself because I didn't want to cause any trouble. Just last week, I went to the Lavendra for the summer sale, but I was informed that the sale had ended the day before. My current PHH, Isabel, really laid into the salesperson. I felt a little bad at first, but I was able to get my items at 60% off. Like it was the sale day. She already paid for herself in a single week. 10 out of 10 would rent again. Warranty from the government prime. I don't usually leave reviews, but my lawyer, PAH, has saved my family business. We were about to lose our lad to a company that was going to build a highway on it, but the little human managed to find a 23,000-year-old exemption because of the farm was once taken over by the Gradic in the Tenurian War, but they never gave it back to the peace treaty. I guess it means we're part of another empire, but we get to keep the family farm. 9 out of 10. I had to buy something called coffee in large batches, and it smelled pretty bad. Gentix from Etherelia. What are you waiting for? Get your PAH today and live life to the maximum. End of chapter. One Punch, written by ChainBlue. The Dreadnought's long, armored hull was green, so dark that it was nearly black. Blue flashes mirrored against the hull as its escort ships of its full battle group popped from slipspace, all in precise formation in high orbit around an unsuspecting planet designated Sol 3. Enemy sensor satellites lit up floating holoscreens all over the bridge. The Exo calmly reported, "An active sensor ping, sir. No weapons locked on, though. One small vessel rising from the surface." The Admiral grinned with 3 rows of needle teeth. They had been scanned, and now the pitiful local species saw the folly of their resistance. A single ship meant that it was a diplomatic vessel coming to offer terms of surrender. He would take this ball of mud without firing a shot. "On the main viewer," he commanded. The ship, indeed tiny compared to his flagship, it wasn't much bigger than one of the escort destroyers. It was an odd little vessel. The hull was mostly yellow, but trimmed with its bits of red, white, and black. Its shape vaguely reminded him of a smooth-domed torpedo. "Hail the," he started to say, but was cut off by the Exo. "Unknown vessel is opening our weapons port," reported the Exo with a sneer. "But a ship that size won't scratch our armor." With no build-up, no gathering of power, absolutely nothing to telegraph the shot, a blinding silver beam lanced out from the tiny ship and slammed into the hull of the dreadnought. A perfectly circular tunnel, large enough to pilot a medium cruiser through, appeared where megatons of armor, bulkheads, and internal systems once resided. The mighty flagship hung there in space for a long moment, exploding into hundreds of thousands of comets of shrapnel that tore into surrounding escorts. The few remaining operable ships received a transmission on all channels. "This is the JDF Saitama. We are here to accept your unconditional surrender." End of story. Humanities' Iron Stomach, written by the Mad Crafter. Clan Leader Yondarn, I'm returning to the homeworld. The summit proved to be, in most respects, as profitable as we expected. The High Earl have agreed to our trade concessions, and the Savag Emporium is withdrawing from the Orion Compact. And the Lowland are still a bunch of interbred fornicating half-wits. Where the summit proved to be infinitely more profitable was making contact with a recent addition to the political landscape. During the second evening of the conference, an Albaran ambassador was arrested when they were charged with attempted poison of a delegate from a species called human, who recently won a small war between 2 species. According to rumors, the Albaran had slipped enough capsaicin into the delegate's meal to kill a fully mature Jandari bog elephant. Naturally, when the delegates returned, very much alive, he was enraged and confused. The Aldebaran ended up confessing in front of the entire summit when he went in a tirade about, "What does it take to kill you people?" Now, as you know, the Kuthna ambassador and I attended Fleet Academy together, and have been blood-sworn to each other for more than once. So, naturally, when we heard about this, we had to investigate. We invited the human to a cultural exchange dinner in order to make the newcomer feel more welcome, and so we could observe. Clan leader, after our observation and further research, I cannot emphasize enough how much this species terrifies me. George, the human delegate, joined us in my quarters shortly after delivery of his people's ethnic cuisines. Humans are, apparently, omnivores, able to nourish themselves from both flora and fauna. Being that the species evolved in a death world, this is hardly surprising. After exchanging pleasantries and sampling several courses, the Kithna opted to make the first move and inquired about the attempted assassination. To quote the human directly, Oh yeah, at first I thought the chef messed up. 'Cause, oh boy, that was that spicy. But then I found out the dumbass squid head had spiked my meal thinking it would kill me. Still laughing about it. I eat hotter stuff all the time. It turns out capsaicin occurs on their planet naturally, and humans ingest amounts that would constitute a war crime in most territories. Intrigued, we produced a list of fairly common poisonous compounds, asking him if any looked familiar. What followed left us in awe. Let's see here. Sodium chloride is a seasoning. Moxidane covers 70% of our planet, and our chemical makeup is like 80%. Oh, and we drink it. And we drink ethanol for recreation. The list went on and on. George clearly could see that we were having a hard time believing him. So he produced a flask of liquid and a chemical analyzer. Apparently this was common for them. After taking a small sample with George's analyzer, my own and one we procured from a nearby lab, we confirmed that the substance was nearly 88% ethanol. George then promptly poured a truly horrifying amount into a glass and drank it all. The rest of the evening was spent, as George described it, playing Feed It to the Human, since the shocking realization of their resilience is so common that their species sees it as some sort of game. I'm attaching a full bioscan and a database on them and their culture, but needless to say, the amount of toxins I watched him ingest, along with the sheer amount of ethanol he drank freely the entire time, would be sufficient to kill several modestly sized moon colonies. Sure enough, the following day, George was still alive, but complaining of what he called a 4-alarm hangover. I advised the clans to immediately establish formal diplomatic ties and enter into a mutual defense treaty as soon as possible. Simply put, if humans' ability to consume and survive some of the most powerful known toxins doesn't concern you, then I advise you to look at page 241 of the attached and note the naturally evolved gland they possess that secretes a known illegal combat drug directly into their bloodstream. Get them on our side. Now, sincerely, Garth Katunga, Ambassador to the Grokax Hordes. End of story. Technical Bob, written by LordsOfJoop. In every one of our ships, we have at least one unique relic. Humans, those hardy, terrifying, obtuse, stupid, ill-advised, glorious wonders, ship them in every direction and from every manufacturing port, some in batches of 2 or 3, others by the thousands. And every ship captain who can carry one, those choose to do so, and find that humans and their allies are much more prone to treating them well for it. Then it comes down to one moment, with one human in one fight, and it wasn't even a culture that got involved. 3 centuries after humans had reached into their skies and plucked their future out of the clouds, they were spreading across the galaxy on the back of anything that moved or admitted paying passages. Hitchhikers, drifters, soldiers of fortune, and even the odd wandering mystic. Having a human aboard meant a small degree of social status. After all, was it not the humans who stopped the plagues of Hynet, damming the flow by sacrificing a ship's worth of its own people, and stave off a surge of the Kalo flower explosion by detonating a power plant on the capital moon itself? Ingenuity, perseverance, and their bizarre means of living, the 3 things which guided most choices in hiring or admitting one aboard a given ship. It meant having a technician who could stay awake for entire cycles as opposed to needing relief after 1.5, maybe 2 shifts worth of time. A medic who could and would donate their own blood to support the comparable species, just out of habit and need. To have a soldier who died defending their chosen charges and exterminate anything that may rear its head as a threat. And if one was lucky, and if the human was so inclined, one could get all three for the same price. Passage to the next port of call, or ship, or just a place on a distant moon to call their own. We long ago gave up guessing why they did that. To travel so lightly, bond so tightly, and fight so blindly. And still, they smile, and they sing, and they dance. And they travel the stars on a whim and die there alone. Those things that they ship out from those manufacturing ports and distribution hubs, they're a type of soft drink dispenser, approximately 2 meters tall, 1 meter wide and deep, and require currency of some level. As they are a symptom of commerce, the brands available are rarely name brand, often almost aftermarket varieties, and they taste, as a rule, like liquid regret. Yet they do the advertised job of providing fluid recharging, and often a distressing, periodically criminal amount of quasi-legal stimulants to boot. Humans seem to enjoy the stuff, so they're kept around for such reasons. And then there's the matter of the little brass placard that is stamped on the side of each of them, one of the earliest designers of zero-gravity friendly variant of the container for the off-brand beverages. He had a child, one of many wonders of the spaceways, and it was he whose name is on the placards. It is his father's legacy, reminding his customers of the importance of being a good human. And it is a warning to the rest of the cosmos that those machines, they are sentinels, hosted in thousands of spaceballs, aboard countless vessels, and abandoned in the strangest of places. A human was here, stranger, and to remember his name. It is a way to honor his son's sacrifice as well. His son, he was known only as Technical Bob, a wanderer of worlds, and he traveled with a machine he himself made in his father's factory, and he slept next to it, wherever he was stationed. It contained a small generator run by loosely regulated fuel slugs, meaning it was inexpensive to operate, if a touch risky. Should someone break it open and steal the barely consumable beverages within it, the generator provided light, heat, and a small amount of current for the running of small devices. The sorts of things that a traveler enjoys and often needs. Nothing major beyond a few tools being recharged on demand, really. Then, one day, the ship he was traveling on, the Kalashai Viceroy, was visited by the Uralai pirate faction, and they rarely kept prisoners for too long. A subspace is an awful way to negotiate hostage pricing, and their crews tended to get bored fast. What with so many juicy, unsuspecting prisoners to play with, until there were none left to enjoy. Thus, most ships, at seeing a Euralian ship, would choose to vent coolants, discard heat sinks, and supercritical their reactors. Better to fry alive than be taken alive, most reasoned. The periodic release of footage captured from the sea's pirate archives was instructive enough of that lesson. That fateful day, Technical Bob was working on the comm suite, monitoring subspace traffic reports, and overheard the moment the pirates' major vessel would be parking close enough to send out their combat drone engineers, which would be more than effective workhorses to literally dismantle the ship that he was riding in. Which, well, he wasn't just going to let that happen. After signing off and discussing the matter with the captain, he asked for 3 things before the captain would suicide the ship itself. 1, that the ship be brought to a sharp, hard turn to port on his command. 2, that the cargo bay that he lived in be vented into space. 3, that someone tell his father that he didn't blame, did love him, and wanted to be remembered for something beautiful. The captain, who'd known Technical Bob for 6 months of hard, often unrewarding and loyal service, saluted the now dismissed technician, and still, he also readied the vent coolant and radiator fins. Whatever Technical Bob had in mind, he never said it would be the end of the problem. Thus, Technical Bob went to his small, barely there home aboard the alien vessel, and did the unthinkable. The story is told 100 ways, you see. Some say he strapped himself to a machine he brought with him. Others say that he opened it up first and then he strapped himself to it. And still others say that he was specific about which brand of beverage he drank before doing all of this, and plunking it almost 500 credits worth of coins, dislodging almost a full 100 cans of soda. In any case, the captain held to his word, and as the pirate ship approached it from behind, seemingly unsuspecting, he suddenly vented both off-gas and every available vernier thruster to port, which had two major effects. The first being any crew members not strapped in regretted that, and the other being it shot Technical Bob and his personal payload out of the ship at approximately 0.009 of light. For a moment, Technical Bob was the fastest living thing in space. And then, Technical Bob opened up the soda machine's front panel. Nearly 100 pressurized, high-speed cylinders packed with fluid shot into the front plating of a vessel used to broadside fighting, and it was followed with 300-kilogram kinetic kill weapon. For that same moment, an unarmed transport ship ready to blow itself into a hydrogen memory was the most dangerous thing in space. Technical Bob rocketed through that ship, course-correcting himself through means left best undiscussed. No two physicists can or will agree on how it worked, yet it did. His maneuver killed himself, of this there is no doubt, and it also carved a hole through the 350-meter ship, the height and width of a standardized cargo bay door. Technical Bob died, of course, and he is alive in every man, woman, and other who sees the name of these machines, just as his entire crew of his swarm ship, many of whom will tell the story with pride. As well we should. Now, gentlemen and ladies of the Elia pirate fleet, you are aiming guns at a vehicle you are pursuing at 0.303 light. The partially Terran starship is hauling 37,599 of those machines, and we have opened all 62 of our portside cargo bay doors. Your move. End of story. It Til It Breaks, written by hixchem. Admiral Gardell pressed his hands to his head, silently, pleading with the incoming headache to spare him. Okay, tell me again, please, exactly how did we lose control of a completely unmanned capital ship in dry dock? The dockmaster before him fidgeted slightly as they gathered his courage. Several subordinates stood behind him passively, waiting for the inevitable round of layoffs that would surely follow such a loss. Well, Admiral, sir, began the dockmaster Cleats. The new systems technician from Terra said that he was doing some stress testing on the computer calls to make sure that they'd hold up. And I guess some human stress tests interacted in an unexpected way with the base code of the ship's operating system. And, Gardell stared, unblinking, letting the silence become oppressive as he waited for the dockmaster to continue. The ship obtained sentience, Admiral. It engaged its own autopilot functionality and left dry dock. And our last tracking suggests it's on a direct course towards the Imperial homeworld. Gardell tapped the datapad rapidly, putting up a map of the ongoing conflict between the Imperium and the National Organization of Righteous Dominion Sovereignties, the edge of the regions of the galaxy, which had long been under sovereignty control, were now being assaulted by the Imperium. These had sparked an escalation of hostilities across the galaxy, with Imperial worlds and sovereignty worlds clashing at every turn. Admiral Gardell frowned at the blinking point moving towards the Imperial Hope world. Are these speed readings accurate? Yes, Admiral. It seems the ship without a living crew decided to divert life support power to engines, and because there are no concerns for acceleration forces on the crew, the ship didn't need to spend the usual amount of time getting up to speed. But this means the ship will reach the center of our enemy's entire control system inside the hour. At that speed, the defensive grids will barely become aware of the ship before it's within firing range of the capital. And you tell me that it was a human who did this. They're still new to the sovereignty. Did we miss something regarding their AI research or ship design theories? Another voice spoke up from the back of the group. They parted to reveal a thin, bespectacled human slouched behind the others. Admiral, I think I can explain. I was using the data core during some downtime to run an entertainment program, and this program has been modified by thousands of my fellows. We have an old maxim about it, mod it till it breaks. And I guess the data core on the ship must have had enough power to actually handle, every mod. And the mods started interacting together, and they got mixed up with some military objective data. And it gained self-awareness, but it's still acting on the context of the game. The human trailed off. Gardell stopped trying to suppress his headache and allowed it to simply wash over him. A game. You humans wrote a game that took over the capital class ship and immediately launched it at the enemy homeworld. That wasn't the intent, I swear, but I can definitely tell you that's what happened. And how can you be sure it was this game? Well, sir, the ship sent a message to dock controls before it left. Admiral Gardell glanced down at the pad and tapped the new message icon. Skyrim belongs to the Nords. End of story. Send for an Aussie, written by Hayel S810. To Earl of the House of and yet ran a worried paw through his whiskers. He was a very anxious elf. He was the first of his house to be given the responsibility of overseeing a new colony on behalf of his lordship, Premier Archduke Lelot McCarm Fassut of the House Talton-Crev, and things could not have gone worse. Firstly, their departure was delayed by finding issues. Then they had lost half of their startup supplies when making planetfall. Then the land turned out to be considerably more arid than he and his fellow Delph were used to. Months of drought made farming impossible, and the rains that brought an end to the drought also brought something much worse. It turned out that the plains had been thronged with deep burrows which were home to legions of huge carnivorous arachnids that had been awakened from their hibernation by the increased moisture. There were terrifying chitinous tanks easily 5 cubits high with drooling fangs and ravenous appetites for flesh. The colony had lost 12 colonists to the monsters before they knew what was happening. Every night the Delph colonists cowered inside their hastily erected compound, listening to them thromping about outside and scrabbling at the walls. They all wanted the nighttime to end, but were too invested to abandon their holdings. His lordship wasn't about to pay for military intervention, but he had allocated funds to pay for mercenaries to take care of the problem. They had managed to get someone to accept the job for a nominal fee. A human mercenary company named Logan Xenomorph Exterminators. It was near sunset when the mercenary ship clattered onto the landing pad, a full half-planetary rotation after it was supposed to arrive. It looked like 3 ships had been in terrible accident, then the most intact pieces were welded together. Out of the flying scrap heap hopped a ragged-looking ape wearing dirty, sweat-stained coveralls. "Good day, cobber!" The mercenary bared its teeth. "Name's Logan. I hear you fellas got a bug problem. Well, no worries. I'll take care of it." To his dismay, Ta'al experienced the added concern that his translator might have malfunctioned. Yes? Are you here to kill the arachnids?" "Well, I ain't here to fuck the spiders, mate. I'll just load up the shotty and take a gander." Logan opened up the hatch on the side of his ship and extracted an ugly-looking firearm. "You dongos better not welch on me." As the sun faded behind the horizon and the darkness fell across the plains, the ground seemed to move. It was the swarms of arachnids emerging to bring terror to the night once again. Ta'al froze. He couldn't believe he'd been so negligent to be outside the compound so late in the day. As if scenting prey, the monstrous creatures stamped towards them. They were already so close that he could see the venom dripping from their jaws. Logan saw them coming too. "Ah, bloody hell, mate. He laughed while putting the gun back into his compartment and withdrawing a long, flat club. I thought you said they were big. End of story. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Mezic, Try Again 95, Pudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athelia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.